So in this video, I want to talk about how I used religion to find God. So I grew up in a Christian household my whole life, and growing up, it felt pretty strict to me. We couldn't listen to certain music, we couldn't watch certain movies, we couldn't play certain games. We had to go to church 3 times a week. Everything was very Christian centered. I think it was definitely frustrating at times growing up, not being able to relate to other kids or other people in school or on my basketball team about current events, or about like anything that's happening in the world aside from like God. And I think over time, it started to affect me more than I thought it did. And what I had come to realize after all these years is that I built up resentment toward Christianity and towards religion as a whole. I remember vividly as a kid, I was maybe like 12, and in church you're taught that you can never achieve a perfect life. Like, you sin every day, you're gonna have to repent multiple times a day, you have to pray and ask for forgiveness. There is no way out, and the only way is through Jesus Christ. And the whole point of a lot of these like Bible verses is to prove to us that we can't do it on our own. We can't save ourselves. All of our righteous works are like dirty rags, so it's like we're being taught that we have to live up to this impossible standard, but then also on the other side of that token told that we can never do it if we wanted to. I took it very seriously, and I wanted to like try to get as close to God as possible. I wanted to try to like prove to myself and prove to others that I was a good Christian, and that like I could purify my thoughts, that I couldn't sin, that I could go a day without thinking about any negative thoughts or any bad thoughts. And I just remember feeling so much guilt and so much pressure every day that I couldn't live up to it, that I was a bad Christian, that I was sinning, that no matter what I did, I was gonna fall short. And it like really, really got to me. And I remember feeling like this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel like how I should be feeling as a Christian. But that thought quickly kind of went out the window and went towards, I just need to do better. I'm the problem, it's me. I need to pray more, I need to read my Bible more. And I think that thought that I had about that this doesn't feel right to me came back later in my life. But I think trying to like just shove that aside and just go and move forward, I think wasn't the right approach for me. I think I had to go through that to kind of get to where I am now. But overall, I appreciate how I was brought up. I respect my parents for doing what they did and for putting us in the best environments that they thought we could do the best in. So fast forward, I was in like 11th, 12th grade. And I started to have a little bit more autonomy as a young adult. I had a job, I had a car. At first we were mandated to go to every church service because our parents drove us and we had to go with them. But once we started to get a little bit more freedom, our parents let us have a little bit more of a leash as far as like giving us freedom to attend certain church events and not attend certain sessions or sermons. But the expectation was that you still have to show up to most of them. Or like if you don't show up like 2 weeks in a row, they're gonna ask you a question, or there's gonna be pressure that, hey, it's Sunday, we're all getting ready for church. Kind of like, are you getting ready? Are you gonna be there? Are you gonna come to the morning service? Are you gonna come to the afternoon service? There was always like still that pressure of like, you have to show up and you have to do something. And so when I went off to college, I moved to a whole different city. And that was the first time where I really had freedom, because that kind of faux freedom, where they would let us skip it, but then there was pressure the next week to go back to church, wasn't actually freedom. And so when I went off to college, I felt like this was the first time in my life where I had my own choice to do what I wanted. I know a lot of people go crazy and they start like going into like drugs and parties and like alcohol and all that sort of stuff. Me, I didn't do any of that. Like, I just wanted to like not have to go to church on Sundays. Like, I showed up to every single one of my classes. I never skipped a class unless I was like extremely sick. I got A's and B's in all my classes. I was diligent, I was focused. I had a good time. Like I had a fun time in college, and I really just wanted to like not think about God and not think about religion and having to do anything anymore. And that went on for a few years. Every once in a while I would like go to a church with a friend, or like when I would be back home in Maryland, I would go to church on like a Sunday or like for the Christmas service or something. But it definitely felt good to relinquish that weight off of my shoulders. And then what I realized is that I was comfortable without really having that relationship with God. And I kind of liked that. But the older I got and the more I tried to live life without having that sort of spiritual connection, I started to run into like burnout over and over and over again. I started to struggle with like my mind and sort of like my values and sort of like who was the kind of person I wanted to be, and was unsure of how to actually get to where I wanted to get to. I felt like I had to do it all on my own. I felt like, it was up to me. And if I just worked hard enough, I can accomplish anything I wanted to, that my life was basically in my hands. And I felt like I knew all the verses. I knew how to pray. I knew how to do all this religious things. So I knew that my whole life. So I didn't really have to keep up with it. It's kind of what my thought was. So I kind of let that fall to the side. I wasn't going to church, wasn't really praying, wasn't really reading the Bible, wasn't really doing any sort of spiritual practice. I would still think about God, and I would still like be grateful and be blessed. And I would still have a somewhat of a relationship with God, but it wasn't really active. And so like 3-4 years went by where I was just chilling spiritually. And life started to kind of like hit me, and it started to like bring me back to being curious about God, being curious about religion, being curious about my spiritual journey. But this time I was curious for myself. I wasn't curious because I was forced to be, or because I had pressure to show up anywhere. And once I started to get into my own spiritual journey, my whole world view changed for the better. I think I only got to that point because I hit so many lows back to back, trying to do it all on my own, trying to do it without God, trying to do it without a spiritual connection. Yeah, and through all the lows, there was always something that was still in the back of my mind that was pushing me towards God. And I always knew and I always heard the importance of the mind, body, spirit connection. And I felt like my mind was strong. I was able to put my mind to something and focus and accomplish it. I felt like my body was strong. I was working out. I was eating healthy. I was in good shape. And I feel like the thing that I was missing was the spirit connection. And so once I got curious again about my spirituality and wanting to connect back to God in my own way, I realized that there was a lot of barriers that I didn't think was going to come up. And I didn't realize those barriers were kind of spiritual trauma. And I never put the two together thinking that I could have spiritual trauma, or that spiritual trauma is a valid thing to have. So I kind of wrestled with, I just don't like church, or, I just don't like this specific denomination, or, I just don't like religion. But I think the guilt and the weight of what I had to endure as a kid made me so uninterested in any religious acts at all. And so for me, it was like, all right, I don't have to wear a tie and go to church and wear a suit. Like, I could read my Bible in my room, and that could be my own spiritual practice. But then other people would tell you, but you have to go to church. You need to go to church. You need to be in that community. I'm like, okay, well, maybe that's what you need to do. Maybe what I need to do is be alone and think and process and meditate and pray. And so I realized I had so much religious trauma built up that it was stopping me from like getting to know God personally. And so it made me even more curious because I wanted to explore finding God without the religious component to it. And so I started to like consume a lot of different content around religion and spirituality, content that I was typically opposed to before because I felt like it was new age content, or that it was false doctrine, or that it would dilute and challenge my perception of God and my belief in God and all that sort of stuff. That's what people would tell you, when you're exploring your spirituality is, they may say, be careful, or, okay, be careful what you watch, be careful what you listen to, because, you can easily slide down and end up not being a Christian, or end up not believing in God. And I felt like that was a struggle that I had to go through personally with people around me trying to tell me that. But, once I'm curious about something, like, you can't limit me, you can't stop me, you can't protect me from myself. You know what I mean? Like, my curiosity is one of the best things I have. And I found that there was actually other ways to find God. If you are looking for it, you will find it. And that's a spiritual principle, and that is something that, whether you're a Christian or not, whether you're spiritual or not, whether you're atheist or not, whatever you look for, you will find. And if you look for moments where God exists, God will show up in those moments. And so I would see God in just random moments, where it's like I start to see angel numbers. I started to connect my physical experience to a spiritual revelation And the threads and how all these different things connected blew my mind, as far as like this could only be like a divine act of how synergies were aligning, how I was curious about spirituality, and then everybody I met had a spiritual background or they had experience in spirituality. So now I was able to ask them questions and hear about their perspective. And some people had religions and they believed in multiple gods, and some people believed in reincarnation, and some people believed in multiple lives. And like there were so much things out there that typically you're told to stay away from because it's false doctrine. But once you start to see the similarities and how all these different cultures, religions, and people experience spirituality, you start to realize the similarities, you start to see the differences, but they all connect in the same way. The threads are all the same. And getting to know other religions was actually helpful in me to continue my relationship with God. And then once my mind became open to receiving inputs and receiving different signals, I was able to see the world in a different way. My perspective shifted for the better. So I'll give you one quick example of sort of how one of these connections for me became clear. It was like a year ago. I just kept having flat tires. My car tire would be flat, my bike tire would be flat. I would constantly be pumping it up. I would get my tires patched, and I had to pump my tires like once or twice a week, whether it be my car tire or my bike tire. And I was just like, why does my tire keep getting flat? And I would take my bike to the bike shop, they would repair it, they would put a new tube in, they would put a new tire in. I'm spending all this money and time trying to think, why can't I just get to where I need to go? And I started to realize that anytime I wanted to get from point A to point B, there was a blockage in the middle. And that blockage was a flat tire. And after about 6 months, I just kept having this problem over and over again. And I got fed up with it. And then at one point I just Googled, like, what does it mean when you have a flat tire spiritually? And then Google came up with all these different answers as far as like, well, symbolically, if you have a flat tire, that could mean that like you're like exhausted, that you're burnt out, that you're overwhelmed, that you're stuck in a cycle, that you're falling behind in life, that you're losing control, all these different suggestions, right? And I started to piece them together, and I'm like, that's actually what I'm exactly going through right now. Like what I was going through in my personal life started to show up in my physical world by a flat tire. And once I started to like see that connection, I started to see that in other things. That if I'm feeling a type of way, something will show up in real life to remind me or to show me the connection between how I'm feeling and my disconnection from God. So essentially what happened was when I went off to college, I kind of took a break from Christianity. Then after a few years, I got back into my spirituality without the religion aspect of it. And once I got into my spirituality, I had to open my mind to new possibilities, new ideas, new perspectives. And once I was able to do that and kind of like filter out and use my judgment, use my discernment, I had to learn how to trust my own discernment, you know, as far as what felt right, what felt wrong, what felt fake, what felt true. And then when you start to realize that there is universal truths that exist, that are backed up by the Bible, that are backed up by these other religions, that atheists believe in these truths, Christians believe in these same truths, Buddhists believe in the same truths. And it's like, okay, so now you start to cross-reference what you believe in, and you start to validate it through other sources. And when all these different things became validated for me, I was like, oh, okay, this gave me more of a foundation in my spirituality and believing in God and knowing and trusting that he exists, and that all I want to do is continue to learn and connect with him. And so once I kind of had this journey of figuring that all out without the structure of religion, I then brought that new knowledge back to Christianity. And I started to look at the Bible in different ways. I started to look at the stories in different ways. I started to be able to relate to them in ways I've never have before, and see the patterns in my own life when I would hear the story of Jonah or another Bible story. I'm like, wait, that's me with this thing, you know, and that's me with that thing. And I think, you know, that's the beauty of curiosity. That is the beauty of looking for it, and you will find it because I found it. And once you find it, it will force you to transform and evolve, because once you see it, there's no way to unsee it. And now that I see it, I see clearly what God is and how God exists in my life and how he exists in the world around me. I'm going to be challenged with that now. I'm going to have to I heard somebody say that values are expensive because you have to pay for it, and as soon as you take a stand for something, somebody's going to come to try to knock you down. And when you stand for something, that means that you're putting yourself in the way of adversity because you're standing up and you're resisting. And now that I have this foundation in my spirituality, life has been hitting hard in other ways. At first, life would be hitting hard because I was just broke, or because I was trying to date people, or just trying to get my business up and running. And those are kind of surface level problems as far as things that I just wanted that I couldn't achieve. But once I started to see the world through a spiritual lens, different problems came to my life that were equal to the level of awareness that I now have. And so my problems are less about physical problems and more about character problems. Who do I have to become to solve this problem? What do I have to believe about myself to overcome this problem? What do I have to sacrifice to get this reward? And using the mind, body, spirit connection, I'm able to get through those problems faster. I'm able to see my pitfalls sooner. I'm able to pivot and adjust and get onto the right track and stay aligned with my purpose, with my values. It's much harder. It's a much harder way to live because now you're going to be faced with transforming at every corner. At every corner I turn around is going to be okay, this person said this. What are you going to do about it? Am I the type of person to stand up for my values? Am I the type of person to have compassion with people? Am I the type of person to have patience with people, with myself? At first I could hide from those questions and be oh, well, that's just business. And oh, you just have to, be a type of way with women, or oh, you just have to do this. But it's now it's okay, now I think about who do I have to become to get this result? And that's a much harder thing to realize and a much harder thing to accept. But to me, that's the spiritual journey. That's the path that I'm on. And that's the path that I'm rather be on. I don't want to be ignorant to these questions. I don't want to be complacent in who I am. My goal is to constantly grow and constantly refine myself. One of the challenges that came up for me throughout this process is my identity now. Because I was able to find God without Christianity in a sense, and have the spiritual connection in this relationship with God. But I also grew up with the stories and the revelations and the metaphors of the Bible. Am I a Christian that has found God through Christianity? Am I a spiritual person who found God and then can relate to Christianity? Does it even matter to have labels? Who am I having these labels for? And I think a lot of times Christians hear, oh, I'm spiritual. And they get concerned that, oh, you're probably actually not a Christian. Or you're probably listening to some false doctrine, or you're probably getting swayed by this new age stuff. Christians can be very judgmental and very this is right, this is wrong. But for me, I've been able to gain more awareness by opening up my perspective and trusting in my discernment and developing trust in that. And I think God speaks to you in ways that only you can understand. And I don't have to trust other people. I don't have to rely on other people's opinions. I just have to trust the voice in my head, the voice in my heart. And to me, I know that that is God. And I know when I'm unaligned with what I'm supposed to be doing, and I know when I am aligned. I think the struggle with the religion is that people want to put you in a box or want you to have to define yourself in their terms. And one of the things that I learned through this journey is that you can find God without religion and you can find God with religion. You can find God through spirituality. You can find God through nature. You can find God through whatever means that you're looking for God in. And so I think some people find God through religion. Some people don't. Some people rather become a minimalist and they find God through the lack of things. Some people find God through silence. Some people find God through charity. Some people find God through traveling the world. There's no right way to find God. And I feel like the only wrong way to find God is by not looking for it. I feel like it's such a beautiful thing because God has set up the universe to be able to connect with different people on the things that they care about. And everybody's not going to want to connect to God through a religious act. Some people may want to connect with God through a very relaxing and spiritual and nature-focused way. And for those people who have that inclination, there's ways for them to find God. And there's ways for people who like structure and practices, there's ways for them to find God. So if you're somebody like me who has been trying to find God for years through one type of way, and you felt like that way may not be the way that you wish you could experience God, there are other ways. And I want people to feel comfort knowing that if you jump off that ledge of, I don't know what else other than Christianity, God will catch you. If your goal is to find God, God will catch you when you jump off that cliff. And a lot of people, and no matter what religion, they're scared to venture out beyond those boundaries. And it takes a lot of courage and a lot of faith to expand beyond those boundaries. But once you do, I feel like you will find a much better way to find God and experience God through a way that connects with you the best. And that freedom has allowed me to go to spiritual retreats, to hear and talk to other people with other perspectives about spirituality than I do, and not have to feel like I'm losing my Christianity or that I'm like backsliding into some new age mantra. You can take what's useful for you and leave what's not. Everything is not going to be useful for you. If you find that Christianity or Catholicism or any other type of religion is enough for your relationship with God, then you're good, you know? But if you feel like there's something missing, or if you feel like there's another way that you wish you could be experiencing God all around you, then I would encourage you to explore that, because it is a much better process on this side of the equation than on the other side. So that's all I have for you guys today. If you relate to this in any way, please drop a comment. I would love to hear kind of like how other people are going through this process. But I'm Kenny, if I forgot to mention that earlier. I make videos about like spirituality, about mindfulness, about minimalism, about lifestyle, kind of all things in this sphere that kind of goes to creating a balanced life. So if you're interested, please subscribe, please like, please share if you found this helpful for yourself, or if you think it'll be helpful for somebody else. That's it for me. I'm gonna head out and get some work done, but I will talk to you guys in the next video.